what is supposed to be a 105-day session. Remember, I have told you before, we're not expecting it to be 105 days. We're expecting it to go much longer because there is very little agreement on what to do with the budget. This week, we're expecting the Senate will propose their budget. Remember that before we started session, the governor had proposed a budget for the state, and now we're expecting the Senate this week, probably tomorrow. And then next week, the House will propose their budget. And then after that, all three parties, all three entities go into negotiations to try to agree at what they're going to, how much they're going to spend and how they're going to spend and whether they need new taxes to accommodate those expenses. And they still remain pretty far apart from each other in those negotiations. So we're probably looking at into May or June before session actually concludes. The good news for you guys, good job on keeping the pressure on Senator Malone and House Bill 1513 on Wednesday at 8 a.m. So our bill will be being heard. I am planning on testifying again. One thing that I need from you all in the next day and a half is to look back at your talking points and refine those for me. Remember, this bill has more provisions in it than 5110 did, so we need to make sure we're talking about all the different pieces of the bill and thinking also about potential opposition to this, refining your arguments for me a little bit more would be helpful when I go to testify. So the bill is in front of the State Government Committee. That's the same committee that had 5110 and did not pass that bill out. So we're facing an uphill battle to get this bill out of the Senate State Government Committee. But I think it can be done if we could keep the right amount of pressure on. There are 5 members of the committee. We need 3 of them to vote for it to get it out, and we need the Senator Milosha to agree to bring it up for a vote. So there's some key people that following the hearing on Wednesday, I'm going to want you to communicate with, in addition to Senator Milosha, and that is the rest of the members of the committee, but particularly focusing on Senator Zeiger, Senator Kuderer, and Senator Hunt. And they can put the pressure on Senator Milosha to move the bill. Somebody asked in the last class if you should be discouraged if you're not getting responses from legislators to your emails, and the answer to that is no. And I'll say what I've said to them, and that is, if I gave up every time somebody didn't answer me or didn't talk to me on an issue, I wouldn't be very successful in this job. Those that don't want to talk to us, they will try to not talk to us, and that's why we have to kind of keep pushing on them and stay in front of them and keep their attention on the issue, to keep it front and center, and to make sure they know that there are people that are watching and that really want the bill. So that is that's what's going on there. Was there somebody asking a question or? Okay, sorry, thought I heard something. The other thing I wanted to talk to you quickly about before we get to questions is, I think you saw my report from last week. We are now into the point where bills have passed over from their original house. They have to pass now out of the committee, the opposite house committee, by next Wednesday, the 29th. So House Bill 1513 needs to move out of the Senate State Government Committee by the 29th of March. They can make changes to the bill. And remember that any step along the way, the legislators can make changes. If they make changes to the bill anywhere in the Senate, it will have to go back to the House for what's called concurrence. So they'll have to agree to that. So any of the committees can change it, as well as they can change it on the floor of the Senate. But our first step is to get it moved out of the Senate State Government Committee. We have a much lower volume of bills this year than years past. Usually we're seeing more close to 3,500, 4,000 bills that have been introduced. This year we're more like 2,600, and much lower volumes of bills that are actually still alive, technically alive in the session. That number being around, I think it's around 500. Usually it's a much higher number than that. So that's good news for our bill in one sense, in that there's not so many competing issues out there. So hopefully we can get the attention on it that it needs. Another question that was asked in the previous class that I'll just go ahead and address here is what if the bill ultimately gets to the governor, what can the governor do? Can the governor change it in any way? And the governor does have some powers in this space in the state of Washington. The governor can delete. He can't add any language, but he can delete language from a bill. So he can delete an entire section out of a bill. He cannot delete just a line or a single sentence. He has to delete the whole section. This is a different power than what the president of the United States has. The president has what's called line item veto power, meaning he can delete a single line in a bill. Our governor can only delete a whole section. And again, neither of them can add language to a bill once it's passed the legislature. They can only take away. So that's pretty much my summary. I'm imagining there are some questions about where we are and what's next. Yes.
Do we just continue to say the same things when we email senators? Because I feel like when we email them, we're just like literally copying and pasting what we've already said.
No, ideally, no. Ideally, you are continuing to ask the same thing, but you're potentially bringing different ideas to point to, or different concepts. Again, that's why I need some help from you guys on some ideas of what else you want me to say in the committee, right? So you might start thinking about some of the other pieces, like think about some of the other concerns there might be out there and how you might address those. Or think about how you can make your arguments stronger so that they are more convincing. So yeah, both in your emails and in what you give me for testimony. Now the ask is always the same. We want you to hear and move this bill and support it through the process. Have any of you gotten responses back from any legislators you've emailed? So again, I'm going to say, don't be discouraged. I literally have had legislators see me down the hall and they know I want to talk to them about something and they turn around and like go the other way and run away from me. So there's a reason that people, particularly Senator Malosha, and I don't know if anybody from this class was there when we tried to talk to him by the doors at the Senate, and he was literally trying to run away from us at that point too. He did not want to talk to us. And that's because he doesn't support the bill. So part of what we're doing is trying to keep it in front of him and let him know you can't just ignore this. We're not just going to go away. The other thing you can do in your emails is ask for a response. At the end of the email, you can say, I would appreciate a response back. And so specifically ask that in your email and you might get one. The other thing is you can pick up the phone and call them. So their offices are open, during business hours. And you can actually pick up the phone and you guys could do a little phone bank during one class where everybody calls Senator Malosha's office and leave a message with his LA saying, legislative assistant, that we want this bill to be moved out of committee. And that's a volume of calls. You could get, there's about 60 of you total. You get 60 calls going into his office at one point. That's powerful. That makes them pay attention. Same thing with Senator Zeiger. Now, Senator Zeiger is the vice chair of the committee, meaning he's the next in charge. So he has a lot of power too. He could push Senator Malosha to actually hear the bill. So you want to spend some time focusing on him as well. But I wouldn't be afraid of doing a phone bank, on Thursday, maybe the day after the bill is heard.
In terms of emails, some people want to email separately and some through the ledge.wa site. Does it matter?
You're the most powerful. So the ranking of powerful interactions with legislators. The most powerful interaction with a legislator is face-to-face, talking, right in person to them, which we did when you came down. The next most powerful is a phone call conversation with them, which you could do. The third most powerful is an email to their actual email address, that being hans.zeiger@ledge.wa.gov, because that goes directly to their office. The least most powerful is using the hotline or the email on the website, because all that does to the offices is gives them a number.
Oh.
It says 15 people emailed you asking you to, support this bill, but it doesn't give them necessarily the whole what you've written. So you're better off emailing to their actual email addresses and to their phone number, and then calling them at their actual offices. The hotline is literally, if you call the hotline, that's the least effective interaction you can have with a legislator. Legislators get a report every day that says, today you've got 45 calls. 5 people want you to, 5 people think you're in Congress in DC and they want you to do something here, and they get a rundown, but they don't get the specifics, as specific of an interaction as if you actually email or call their offices.
All right, that's what we'll do.
Yeah, hand in the back.
Secretary of State expected to testify again on Wednesday.
Yeah, I would guess she would probably be there to testify. Did anybody try to communicate with her?
Raise your hands. Who tried? 3?
And any response from her?
No.
Okay, yeah, not surprised. She will probably be there to testify. And we'll see what she has to say. I will probably mention that you all have been trying to reach out so that we could work out, whatever the problems are with the bill, and so I'll call her out on it a little bit. You too.
Sorry. So who should we focus our attention on? Just those 3 people or anybody else?
Well, so the chair for sure, we just have to stay on the chair, on Melosha, but then the other 3 targets are Zeiger, Cooterer, and Hunt. And I'll send the link to that, to their web pages where you can click on them again. And their email addresses. Yeah.
So when they're extending the session, do they have to do anything for that? Do they vote on how many extra days, or is it just we stay here until we figure it out?
Good question. So what happens is the session will actually end on April 23rd. The regular session will end, and then the governor is who calls them back in. And he can call them in for 30 days at a time. So usually what he does is calls them in immediately the next day and calls a special session to last 30 days. If they don't finish the work in that 30 days, then he will call another 30 days and so on until they finish their work. The one deadline that's really, really important, by July 1, they have to have a budget of some sort adopted or government shuts down. They can't continue to operate without an actual budget. And the fiscal year ends June 30th, and so they have to have a budget adopted by July 1. Pretty safe to assume that will probably be done at least by July 1. But they are 30-day special sessions.
I have a question. So you said that the volume of bills was a lot smaller this year. Is there a reason for that, or is it just kind of?
Yeah. I think it's primarily because everybody is so focused on this big education problem that they're trying to solve. And it's just absorbing a lot of the space and energy in the session. And so people are just focused on that and not as much focus on other things. That is frustrating to some of the folks that have other issues that they want to work on, like healthcare and environmental issues and business issues and all of those things. Education is really sucking all the air out of the room this year. Any other questions?
Besides education, what are the other big issues?
Mental health is taking a lot of time as well. Mental health and then add homelessness to that. I know we see that a lot in Seattle. It's a problem that is happening all across the state, and a lot of discussion of how to address mental health issues. Following on that, which is kind of attached, is the opioid epidemic. I'm gonna put on my mom hat for a minute and tell you all to stay away from opioids and heroin. We had a work session the other day down here where some people were talking about the effects of heroin. They told a story about this couple who was living in the jungle in Seattle, where the tents are. And they were shooting up heroin and passed out from doing it. The wife woke up and her husband was so out of it, he didn't know that a rat was eating his face. Ate his eyeball out, ate half his face off. And he was taken to Harborview, was stabilized and fixed, and they went back to the jungle to continue using heroin. So stay away from it. It's bad. It's a big problem in the state. So that issue is taking a lot of energy in the state. There's an issue dealing with wells, with water. There's a Supreme Court decision that said that in the unincorporated areas, which is the areas of the state that are not cities, that there had to be a limitation to the number of wells that were allowed, which has caused a lot of problems for people trying to build new houses. So that issue is being dealt with. And then a whole bunch of other smaller things. So those are really the big ones that are going on.
How are your, go ahead, sorry.
So, you said that like when the bill reaches the governor, that he can like delete sections. Does that mean like once, if he deletes it, can he still just sign it, or does it have to be like back to the houses to be approved again?
No, he signs, he says, let's say he vetoes a section, then he signs it. The only thing that can happen after that is the legislature can override his veto. They have to have 2/3 of a vote of both the House and the Senate, and they can override that and say, no, Governor, you can't delete that. But if they don't have the 2/3 vote to override it, then his veto stands until somebody runs another bill to try to fix that language.
When you say 2/3, is that like 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate, or is it 2/3 like?
2/3 of both bodies. You have to have a vote in the House and a vote in the Senate. 2/3, you have to have at least 2/3 supporting that override.
How are your own bills doing that you work on?
Let's see, I think I told you about the AP credit bill, the AP credit policy bill that I'm working on, that would ensure that if you get a 3 or higher on an AP test, that you have access to getting actual college credit to that. So right now, some schools are not giving credit for 3s, they're only giving credit for 4s and 5s. And that bill, both the House bill and the Senate bill passed their respective bodies and are in the other side. So they both had a hearing, so I think we're in pretty good shape there. Hopefully that one will pass. I have a bill that would make sure that yoga studios aren't regulated as vocational schools. In other words, trying to make yoga studios into like a community college kind of thing. It's complicated, but that bill has passed the Senate as over in the House. Working on a bill for interpreters that deals with labor and industries, kind of wonky, complicated issue. That bill's doing okay. I'm also working on the education, big education stuff with a couple of clients, and so I'm involved in that. And trying to get funding for the WSU Medical School, which is a client of mine, the new medical school over at Washington State University in Spokane. And don't tell the clients that I forgot about, but I've forgotten a couple others. But most things are going pretty well. I haven't lost yet this year, so we'll put it that way. Except 5110, but 1513 is still alive, so I don't count that as a loss. Anything else? Oh, way in the back, yeah.
What's going on with the
With education? Yeah, I can give you kind of the over. So essentially, the McCleary lawsuit that was named, it's the kid's name that was a group of people filed a lawsuit many years ago. And the argument was that the state is not adequately funding education. And the reason, and it's not, in the media, it's portrayed as it's not a big enough check, but it's really much more complicated than that. And that is, over the years, because the state itself has not been funding enough of the cost of basic education, so that's just the basics, right? Then districts have had to pass levies, and your parents have probably voted on levies before. Those are locally voted taxes that people pay on their property taxes to help fund schools in their area. What's happened with that is areas that are wealthier have been able to pass levies and have been able to raise more money for their schools. And areas that are not as wealthy have not been able to pass levies. And what's resulted in is an unequal system. In other words, the schools over in Lake Washington and Bellevue, they have a lot more money to spend on education than, say, schools in Yakima or Tacoma. And the result is an inequity. What the court said was that it's the state's responsibility to pay for all of basic education, and levies are only supposed to be used for things that are extras, like extracurricular type things or add-on type programs that are not basic education. And so the big problem here is the state has to take the majority of the burden and pay for all of basic education. So it requires a change in how property taxes are collected, in some way equalizing that out so that people aren't paying higher in some areas and not in others, and creating, that's really complicated, and there's lots of different views on how to do that. So there's that's the big piece. And then the next piece is, how much does basic education cost, and how much more money do we need to spend in basic education to make sure everybody's getting the same? And people are around the notion of $1 billion or so more than where we are now in education. Education takes up over half the current $36 billion budget. And so, you know, I'm not gonna say the number correctly, but it's over half of the $36 billion budget. And estimates are we need to find another $1 billion or so to add to the state's burden to pay for education. And then the third question is then, once you have the amount you need to spend, what are the programs that you have to spend money on? And so for example, my clients believe that there are some key things that actually drive to helping students succeed. And there's a whole slew of things, but highlights are access to high quality teachers like Mr. Faiza, the best teachers in front of the class, right? The second is access to things like career and technical education, meaning if you want to be a Boeing machinist, you should have opportunities to prepare for that in high school, not only people that are going to college. So Ballard actually is really good in this space, in that you have the Marine program, you have the biotech and marketing, those, but more access to career and technical college opportunities for kids. More access to dual credit, and dual credit is things like AP, IB, college in the classroom, the ability for students who do want to go to college to earn college credit in high school so that college becomes less expensive. Things like making sure that that money that the state sends out actually reaches you, the students, with programs that you need, right? And so the debates that are going on is, how do we fix this levy problem? Then what's the actual number that we need to drive out to the schools? And then what are the programs that are going to make the most difference? The thing that's challenging for Washington State is we're ranked 41st out of 50 states in terms of our graduation rates. That means 40 of the other 50 states have higher graduation rates than Washington State does. 78% of our students in Washington State graduate from high school. That means 22% of kids don't graduate. That's a problem, because as you know, all of you know, as you're starting to figure out what's next, the step number one is a high school diploma. If you don't have that, you're starting out your life really at a very, very severe disadvantage. So everybody down here is agreed that the goal is to get that to be to 50 to 100%, right? Graduation rate, and then 100% opportunities for students afterwards. The debate is, what are the best ways to spend that money? And that's what's going to drag this out. It's a very complicated issue, and people come at it from very different perspectives. That's a good question. Anything else?
Looks like that took the wind out of people's sails.
It's complicated. I can send you a few articles that are interesting, but it is really, really complex issue. It's a lot more complex than King 5 would, really reports. It goes a lot deeper than we just need more money, and everybody agrees on that. Everybody that's working on this, and that's why it's taken so long to work it out. All right, so I need some good new and scintillating talking points for my testimony, and then focusing in on the committee as soon as that testimony is over. I might see if we can get a special guest next time. I'm gonna check out, see if we can get somebody from the Secretary of State's office maybe to come and join me at our next connection. So I'll see what I can do there.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Vicky.
Okay, have a good day, guys.
Good, go get them on Wednesday.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.